This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
I'm Jessica. Rochelle?
She already took her headphones out. So Rochelle doesn't want to hear the introduction of the stories because she wants to be surprised. And so we were talking about it beforehand. We're like, okay, yeah, just say your name and then take your headphones out. And she forgot to say her name.
Oh, whoops. Okay.
So that's Rochelle.
Hi.
Okay, bye, Rochelle.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take these out now.
Okay.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Jess.
All right, so
fine.
Ashley is doing the story of Chandra Lawson, and I am going to be doing the story on the wrestler Chris Benoit. He's Canadian, too.
Ooh.
Very fascinating.
Okay, you can give a symbol.
Hello. I am
Hi, are you
so
ready?
excited. I am so excited.
All right.
Okay. Good. I'm excited. All right, so Jessica's going to help me out because I have a 911 call that I'm going to read part of it, and she's going to be the 911 operator.
So I'm obsessed with dialogue.
All right, go ahead, Jess.
911.
I need an ambulance. They need to hurry. My wife's dying. I shot her with a pistol. Oh, my God.
Where did you shoot her at?
I don't know. I just fired.
Where's the pistol?
Oh, God. I've just killed her.
Listen.
Oh, God.
What's your name?
My name is Brian Stephen Lawson.
Dun, dun,
So
dun.
this was the 911 call that Brian made from East Tennessee on January 27th, 2017. So thank you for your help, Jess.
You're welcome. I'm always here for assistance. Thank you and good night.
All right, so Brian had been with Chandra. I'm going to struggle with that the whole time.
Is it just Chandra?
Her name is, it's Beth Chandra Lawson, but she went by Chandra.
Okay.
And she spells it with a CH, so that's why I keep wanting to say Chandra, but it's definitely Chandra.
Okay. Well, I said it wrong as well for you, so you're welcome.
Perfect. So Brian had been with Chandra for about 10 years. And in this time, Chandra was unfortunately very abusive to him, but he kept it a secret. One of the things he said is, there aren't any classes for what to do if your wife's beating on you. And people would say, you're really big, because he was a big guy. Why didn't you just hit her back or get up and leave? But he thought that she would kill him if he hit her back. And one time he did try to leave, but she put a gun in her mouth and said she would kill herself, which is a pretty typical tactic of a abuser.
Holy shit. Okay, when you told me about this story, and then I also saw the 911 dialogue, I didn't think that, she was the one that was abusing him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
That
Yep.
didn't cross my mind at all. I thought maybe he got, angry or whatever. That's insane.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah. And it's harder. There have been studies, that men rarely come forward when they are getting abused because there is that kind of societal, oh, they should be macho. Why are you letting a little woman beat up on you?
Yeah.
But, they use the same psychological tactics that male abusers use,
Yeah, of course.
But Brian said, she wasn't always like this. They first met when he was about 25 years old, and she was in the National Guard. She was due to be deployed in Iraq, but during a training, she broke her neck. She didn't get paralyzed, but it did cause her to be in a lot of pain, so they kind of basically threw pain medicine at her. And so, like many stories we hear, she became addicted.
Yeah.
She became so addicted that at the end there, she was basically shooting up, with a needle, the pain medicine. And they showed a before and after picture of her, and it's insane what drugs does to your body. But
I need to look up a picture now.
Yeah, the pictures that if you just search her and then see the pictures, those are all of her, like, good before pictures. I'm not seeing any of the after pictures.
Okay.
But they did show it on this. Oh, I should probably cite my source. I watched a documentary on A&E called, what's it called? Accused, Guilty or Innocent.
Okay.
That's what it's called.
Oh,
So,
you guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I also used Knox News, like KNOX, like Knoxville, Tennessee News.
Okay.
Okay, so obviously her drug use put a strain on their relationship, but Brian was born with a club foot, and he said that it was almost all the way, like, backwards when he was born. And so they did a ton of surgery on him, but eventually there was just, like, no more surgery that they could do, and they couldn't get his foot right, and apparently it was really painful. So he also got addicted to pain medication. But eventually he did go to rehab, and while he was in rehab, he found out that Chandra was pregnant, and this is what caused him to finally get clean. But the same could not be said for Chandra, unfortunately.
At least he got clean.
Yeah, he got clean. Unfortunately, she continued to use. And so on January 27th, 2017, the morning of that 911 call, Brian and Chandra got into one of the many arguments that they get into, and Chandra begins to hit Brian over and over and saying that she was going to kill him. So everything that I say in the story that is what was said, like their dialogue between them, comes straight from Brian, because obviously Chandra, dang it, couldn't, tell her side of the story.
Yes.
So he said that she was pointing to the door and said, no matter who comes in here, everyone is dying. And at this point, their son was there as well. She said that she was going to murder Brian and then take her son and herself and murder the son and then die by suicide.
Oh, you know what? Your story and my story are very similar.
Are they?
Mm-hmm.
In a not so great way?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Ironically, because I knew nothing about your story and you knew nothing about mine.
Yeah. So allegedly, for his safety, Brian put a pistol in his pocket when Chandra left the room to go get their son. Mm-hmm. And when she returned, Brian shot Chandra 3 times, causing her death.
Oh my goodness.
And he shoots the pistol from inside his pocket. So it's like in his pocket, and he just shoots it off, hitting her in the stomach. She fell to the ground. And he said he just couldn't take another beating.
Oh, geez. Gut wound. That's terrible.
Yeah. So some of this story is corroborated because they have video. Because about a year and a half before this incident, Brian apparently caught a girl who he said had been arrested about a week prior breaking into a nearby apartment. So he went out and got security cameras. Him and Chandra went out and got security cameras and put them all over their house. So this whole interaction is caught on security camera.
Oh, no.
You can't hear anything. It doesn't have audio, but you can see it all. And they showed it. They showed him shooting her. They showed her laying on the ground. It was crazy.
That's heinous.
Yeah. So this is what the video showed. The morning of January 27th, 2017 was just like any other morning. Brian was sitting in the living room in his usual chair waiting on his wife, who was in the bedroom standing and watching TV. Kind of like, when you're like getting ready, but you're kind of like going slow and kind of like watching TV as you're getting ready. She was doing that.
Like the dads that just pass by and they're like, oh, what's that on the TV? And then they just stand there staring at the TV.
But that's what
it's
she
like,
was doing.
Sit down.
Exactly. But that's what she was doing. And so Brian finally headed to the bedroom and he was like, hey, we got to get going. We're already behind schedule. We're already late. And according to Brian, this caused her to get extremely angry, and she, like, snapped. And you can see the footage of her yelling at him in the bedroom, and then footage of him sitting in the chair, and she's yelling at him as well there. She was bending over and kind of, like, getting in his face. Like, he's sitting in a chair, and she's standing up and kind of, like, getting in his face, yelling at him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, she just, like, snaps and starts just punching him all over, hitting him in the head. He was, like, pulled up his legs and his arms and was, like, trying to shield himself. She stops for a second, yells again, and then just starts beating on him again. She then went to the window and grabbed a bat that had been laying there and came like she was going to swing at him. She did. She hit him once with the bat, and then he was able to, like, grab it, and then they kind of, like, struggled with it, and ultimately he was able to pull it out, or she was able to pull it out of his hands. And then she was, like, bouncing it up and down in her hand, you know, kind of like you have the bat and you're, like, hitting your hand with it, you know, like
getting ready.
I'm gonna beat you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian was just sitting in the chair, like, trying, like, you could tell he was abused. Like, he was just sitting, like, as small as he could, just trying to calm her down. She then takes the bat and repeatedly hits the ground right next to his club foot that he had all those issues with.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah. And Brian said this was completely normal behavior for her.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the video, you can see that this is not the first time, because he doesn't react, like, surprised or, like, shocked that she's doing this.
Yeah.
You know, he just was kind of sitting there trying to calm her.
Like, was it convenient for him that he had videotape? Like, is that good for him, or?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah, because you can see, and then you can see another video of her kicking him and stuff like that. So it's not the first time she's abused him.
Go ahead, Rochelle.
I'm, like, blown away by the fact that, like, does she know she's being recorded? Like, of course. Right?
Yeah, because she and him went out to get it. It's almost like she didn't even care, you know?
Yeah, she just thought that, like, maybe she had that power over him and he would never do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's scary to think that if he didn't have video footage, what would have become of him.
Exactly.
Right.
100%. And that's what his lawyer said, too, later on.
Like, if he didn't have that, he 100% would be convicted. Like, I'm assuming he wasn't. But, like, I just feel like everything would be so much worse. And he, like, they just wouldn't listen to him, right? Especially because she's...
Yeah, because usually they believe the woman is being abused over the man.
Exactly, yeah. Crazy.
So he alleged that she said, "I haven't decided how you're going to die, but you're going to." And I'm assuming it probably wasn't the first time she had threatened this either. But as was said earlier, Chandra left the room. She got their son and brought him back into the living room. While she was doing this was when he grabbed the pistol and put it in his pocket. Chandra came back over and was yelling at him again, saying everyone's going to die. Again, we don't know exactly what was said because there's no audio, but this is what he's saying she said. And then she started hitting him in the head again. And you guys, their son was right there watching all of this. And he's like 2.
That poor boy.
I mean, there's no way he's not going to be fucked up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, he's at an age that he might not remember.
Well, this next part I think he'll remember, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, like...
Oh, my God.
Okay, so Brian is sitting in the recliner, right?
Yeah.
Chandra is, like, standing over him. And their little boy is standing to the right, like, right by his dad's leg. So he's, like, right next to his leg. And from his pocket, he shoots Chandra 3 times with his son standing, like, right next to him. And you can see in the video, like, it hurts his son's ears because he's, like, holding his ears afterwards. Yeah. Like, that's how close he was.
What? Why would you do that?
Yeah. So he immediately picks up the son. and calls 911 as she's struggling on the floor. And it's, like I said, they show her struggling on the floor. Like, she's a little out of view of the camera, so you can only see, like, middle of her body over. But she's laying on the floor, and, like, her hand is up, and she's, like, it's insane. I've never seen a video like that before. It's insane.
Was it, like, in that documentary, or?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So then get this. Brian's sitting at the police station. His son is there too, you know, because they took Brian in, and the son, they had to figure out what to do with the son. A friend of Brian shows up and says, "Hey, that little boy, that's my son," but no one knows about it.
What?
So, yeah. So the court's like, well, we have to take a DNA test. So they take a DNA test, and no, that was not Brian's son.
What?
So Chandra had an affair, got pregnant with their friend, and lied and said it was Brian's.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And he had no idea until this guy came to the police station and was like, "Hey, that's my son. I'll take him," since, you know, all this shit went down.
And he just, like, randomly showed up.
Yeah.
What?
They didn't really go too much into that. Like, how did he know? Like, I don't know if they were good enough friends that, like, Brian called him or how that worked. I'm not sure. They didn't really delve into that much.
Yeah.
But Brian's obviously devastated. Like, he thought this was his son. And
I am so shocked. Like,
I know!
now. Like, that was a major, like, I
Yeah.
don't even know. I don't know. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that at all.
I know. And this is going to come into play in a little bit, too. So, because of all this, the court issues a no-contact order between Brian and his son, Braden. And Brian is charged with first-degree murder and reckless endangerment. I'm assuming the reckless endangerment was against the son, or, like, because of the son.
Because the son was there.
Right. And one of the things they did say is Chandra had another son named Liam from a previous, I'm not sure if it was a marriage or a relationship, and Liam's quite a bit older. He was a teenager at the time. And he apparently, like, they have him on the documentary, and he, like, forgave Brian for murdering his mom and, like, still visits with him. Because Brian got out on bail, so while he was waiting trial, he was home. And Liam went and still visited Brian and, like, I think just really kind of knew what his mom was like, I guess. I don't know. It was just an interesting point in the documentary that they brought up.
Wow.
So all of this video that they had, the prosecution had, and they only released the, like, murder part to the defense attorney. And so the defense attorney's like, no, we want all of it because we want to show that she was continually using drugs and the abuse and everything. And so they actually had to take the prosecution to court because they wouldn't release the evidence to them.
Why?
And so the judge was like,
so stupid.
dude, you got to release the evidence.
Yeah.
So once they released the evidence, the DA was like, well, now that you've seen that, like, they kind of knew they didn't have a case, really. Mm-hmm. So they're like, we'll make a deal with you. They said they would drop the charges to voluntary manslaughter.
What?
And allow him to be seen as a mitigated offender, which means he would only serve 20% of his sentence, and then he'd be eligible for parole. So it didn't mean that he would serve 20% and be out. It meant he would serve 20% and then be eligible for parole.
But, like, isn't this kind of like self-defense or no?
That's what his lawyers are saying.
Okay.
They're saying it was self-defense. So the sentence would be 15 years, and then after 3.5 years, he would be eligible for parole. But the lawyer said, like, this is such a cut and dry case of self-defense. We have all of this, you know, evidence. And he's like, obviously you never know what's going to happen with a jury trial. You know, something crazy could happen. But the lawyer said if it was him, he would take it to trial.
Yeah.
What would you guys do? Would you take it to trial or would you take the deal? Because if it went to trial and he got convicted, he would be life in prison.
I would go to trial. You have video evidence showing everything that was happening. So, like, that alone to me would prove innocence.
I can see them trying to, like, pull the point that, like, you shouldn't have used more, like, force than she did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it should have been, like, if she was using a bat, then he shouldn't have been using something that was more, like...
Yeah.
Oh, what's the word I'm trying to find? Like,
a weapon that could do more damage than what she was using.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that hammer. Do you remember the Hammersmith ghost episode I did a while back where that guy shot who he thought was a ghost, and they said that it like basically couldn't be self-defense because the other person didn't have a weapon and they were only doing like petty crimes at best. And so it kind of reminds me of something like that.
Okay, so let me give you this next little bit of information and see if your stance.
Oh, okay.
So Braden, the little boy, was at the time spending.
What?
Shelley, you okay?
Yeah, sorry, I'm like so into this.
So Braden right now is spending time between his grandparents, so like his mom's parents, and Brian's parents. But remember, they found out that Brian is not biologically his father. So basically, Chandra's family is in control of who gets to see Braden. And right now, they're letting Brian's parents see him. So Chandra's family wanted Brian to take the deal because they didn't want to go to court and have all of this information come out about Chandra, about being a drug addict and being abusive and all that kind of stuff. And that basically, you know, if he took it to trial, they would not let his parents see Braden anymore. So would that change? Would that make you take the deal, or would you still go to trial?
I'd still go.
Wait, so if he went to trial, then he wouldn't be able to see the kid?
Yeah, and neither would his parents, because Chandra's family would say no. And technically, Brian and his parents have no biological claim over Braden.
I don't agree with that, because, like, he's not the guy that raised him. Like, he wasn't his dad.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, that guy knew he was the father and never came forward until something happened is a little suspicious.
Right. Yeah.
I would still go to trial.
Well, Brian took the plea deal.
No.
Yeah. So he is in prison, and he is still in prison because this happened in 2017. So he will be in prison for 3.5 years before he's eligible for parole. I do, however, think that if anybody would be getting parole, it would be him. But we'll see when his time comes up.
Dang.
Wow.
And that is the story of the murder of Chandra.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Wow, that is not where I thought that story was going from the beginning.
I know.
That was really good, Ashley. Really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
Still, like, I still trying to, like, process what happened. It was all, like, twists and turns.
Our stories are very similar.
Are they?
Well, like, not the, like, sort of very similar. They're pretty similar.
Okay. Jess, tell us.
What was that dream you wanted to tell us about, Jess?
Tell us about your dream.
Okay. I don't like remember a lot of details about it, but I guess doing this podcast has like really messed up my psyche. So, so you guys know the Hunger Games,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So it was kind of like that, but instead you were chosen to just simply die. Okay, so. So you would have to like go really high up to like this really high up diving board. They would put like a noose around your neck, and then you would run and jump off. And but like instead of it hanging you, your head would just pop off and fly off. So so I was chosen, and like for some reason I found a loophole. And okay, so in real life, I have no nails. I bite my nails constantly because of stress.
Too.
But yes, so like it's a horrible, horrible habit. I hate it. But like in this dream, I had nails, so I found this loophole. I don't know how. It was a weird ass dream. But instead of like running off the diving board and popping my head off and dying, they would just rip all my fingernails off instead. So I'm like, okay. And so I survived. But then apparently I was chosen again, like Katniss was in the Hunger Games. And I was talking to this other person because I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to go with the fingernail thing again. Because, I mean, they gave the option to me yet again. I'm like, why don't you choose the same thing? And he's like, well, because, you know, having my head pop off is pretty painless. But having all of my fingernails ripped off, I'd be in a lot of pain for quite a while, so.
Not
That's so fucked up.
not wrong. Yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah,
a true statement.
True.
And absolutely
Yeah, and
a
then I woke
valid
up.
argument there.
Like, honestly, though.
That
Oh my
reminds
gosh,
me
that's
of like two things combined. It reminds me of that scene in the movie Midsummer where the like old people like go face first off the cliff. Have you ever seen that movie?
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
No,
I haven't seen it yet
I
either.
just saw a scene where they were bashing heads in.
Well,
Ew.
yeah. Well, that's basically what happens. They like go down, and the first woman goes down, and she like gets a proper splat, and then the guy goes down and he doesn't, and so some other guy grabs this big wooden mallet and comes down and bashes.
Yeah, that's the scene I saw.
Okay,
Ugh,
yeah.
horrible. Yeah.
And then it also reminded me that the last hanging in Canada, the guy's head popped off.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
Last hanging in
fascinating.
Canada was at the Don jail, and it was a double hanging. And one of them's head
Cool.
was no more.
Popped right off.
Wild.
Ew.
Oh, I had one other thing to talk about. So do you guys remember when I talked about Paul Bernardo? It was like episode 36.
Oh, I
and
know
the
what you're
Ken
gonna
and
talk
Barbie
about.
killers.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so he was denied parole again today.
Oh, good.
Yes, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
He keeps going up for parole, and then they keep denying him, which is just fantastic. I love it so
Good.
much.
Yeah.
It's
He does
so
not need to be
funny
paroled.
because the report on it too is so short. It's like Paul Bernardo was standing before like the cameras or whatever. They decided that he's not getting parole again. Like that's it.
That's
It's
too
just
bad.
like, no.
Yeah.
We're,
Like
that's all we
surprise,
say on it.
surprise, we're not letting this asshole out. Like
That's so funny. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so my story for this week.
Aw.
My husband had sent it in as a recommendation through our website. So he had seen, or not seen, I guess he can't watch us. He had listened to Ashley's episode on Aaron Rodriguez, the football player.
Hernandez.
Thank you. Anyway, so you're talking about CTE, which is that concussion stuff, and he
Yeah.
had suggested Chris Benoit, who is a Canadian wrestler. So that is who I'm going to do. And to get all my information, I watched a documentary called Dark Side of the Ring, like the wrestling ring. It's a documentary about a bunch of different wrestlers, and he had like a 2-parter of this series. So I do want to preface this like a content warning of child death and domestic abuse. Yeah, so I cried a lot while watching this episode.
So this is
I'm really
gonna be
hoping
a
I
great
don't
fun time.
I have jokes for afterwards. Sorry.
These are not very nice surprises.
I'm so sorry. Okay. So let's just rip off the Band-Aid. All right. Chris Michael Benoit was a Canadian professional wrestler for 22 years. He was born May 21st, 1967 in Montreal, Quebec. And he was known as the Canadian Crippler. He had a son, David Benoit, from a previous relationship. His son was in the documentary, and it was just very fascinating to like listen to him talk about his dad and stuff. And they had a bunch of different like wrestlers as well in the documentary talking about Chris Benoit and stuff and about the story and stuff. So it was very interesting to watch. I actually really recommend people watching it because I'm not even like into wrestling, and it was very fascinating to watch. So
Gotcha.
Kyle and I sat down for like a couple hours one night and just watched every episode. They're about like 50 minutes each. So it was pretty good. Chris Benoit looked up to a wrestler named the Dynamite Kid, and he was a wrestler back in the 80s and early 90s. He actually went to one of his wrestling matches in Edmonton and then decided that he wanted to become a wrestler. He's like, this looks real fun. Let's try it.
Okay.
Let's fling off ropes and land on men's heads. A lot of people that were being interviewed.
I would like to at one point like jump off of a wrestling ring.
Oh, I'd be terrified. I'm like scared of heights.
So I actually had a friend back in Charleston that dated this guy who was a semi-pro wrestler, and he was just the most ridiculous person.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of people that were being interviewed for this documentary actually idolized Chris and claimed that he was one of the greatest wrestlers and a really good worker. So basically, he performs as required in order to make other guys look good, and he was super focused on what he was doing. Because a lot of like wrestling is acting, right? Like storylines and stuff. So yeah. Wrestling was actually his first and his last job, and it was the only thing that ever earned him a paycheck. So like wrestling was literally his life.
Yeah.
If he made even like the most minute mistake, he like in the ring, not in everyday life, but like in the wrestling ring.
Yeah.
He would actually punish himself by doing exercises, and by that I mean he would do like 500 squats. That is an example.
Wow. My
500
legs would fall off.
500 squats
squat
to punish himself for making like a very minor mistake that like really nobody else would have noticed or known about.
Don't think I could even do 5 squats.
Exactly.
Like
I know, it's insane. So yeah, this guy was just like, oh, I gotta get this shit done.
Yeah.
His best friend was Eddie Guerrero, who he met in Japan in the 80s, and he was also a fellow wrestler. And they were best friends from the day they met. And this is very important. Him and Eddie's relationship is very important to this story.
Okay.
love a bromance.
Yeah. they were a good bromance.
So cute.
So Chris's wife Nancy started off married to a man from high school, who was a massive wrestling fan. So he would take her to wrestling shows, and she actually started to really enjoy it herself. So she was seen, I believe, in the stands, and she got hired on as a wrestling model. And she started touring around with a man named Kevin Sullivan, who was a wrestling promoter and wrestler. And while she was kind of touring around with him, she was also going through a divorce with her first husband.
Oh.
She...
Can I guess where this story is going to go?
Yes, please.
And I don't think that I'm right. I think I'm very wrong.
Okay.
But so far I can just see her like in behind the scenes like training, and then they like come out for a surprise duel against each other, but he doesn't know who he's supposed to be fighting against, and she's there and she just wrecks him. That's it.
She's not a wrestler.
Yet. She's not a wrestler yet.
Imagine. That's so funny.
I have a feeling that you're not correct.
Oh no.
It was a fantastic guess though. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. She ended up also becoming a ringside performer because she was very beautiful and sexy, and she was referred to as the fallen angel.
See, she's there. She's learning the ropes. She's watching. She's like taking it in.
It's true. She was also called Woman. Just Woman.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. So Nancy and Kevin Sullivan were briefly married until Nancy met Chris Benoit at World Champion Wrestling, which is the WCW, in the early 90s, when Kevin Sullivan hired Chris Benoit as a professional wrestler for his storylines. And part of his storylines with Chris involved like him and Nancy being seductive with each other and kind of like having an affair in the background behind Chris's back and like kind of taunting him and stuff. So, but that was just all a storyline, but it was like kind of recorded, acted, performed out. Like it was just very, very weird, but like super fascinating. But that's kind of how they got close together.
Gotcha.
So Kevin basically brought on his own divorce.
Oh no. That's sad.
There are actually physical altercations at the home of Kevin and Nancy, and whenever they would fight, Nancy would run to Chris for comfort.
Oh.
Kevin was approached about these physical abuse allegations, but of course he denied it ever taking place.
Of course.
But like Nancy's sister would say that like, you know, she would have bruises, black eyes, stuff like that. So she said stuff was going on. Chris actually helped Nancy get out of this relationship, and then eventually Chris and Nancy got together. They had a son who they named Daniel, and they also got married. Chris started getting irritated with the WCW for not getting in the main event spots because he wasn't the tallest or the most muscular. And those, I think, are like the better paying spots.
Gotcha.
So like, you know, he's a guy that works super, super hard and he's not getting anywhere because he doesn't fit a specific standard, you know?
Gotcha.
So Chris and a few of his friends, including his best friend Eddie, all walked out of the WCW and got hired into the World Wrestling Federation, WWF, at the time. And almost immediately, and they were hired almost immediately by the WWF. I messed that up. Which is like a huge step up from where they actually were. So it was a really good step in the right direction. Chris was described by everyone as a great father, someone who loved his children very dearly. He would actually feel really sad missing out on events back home, but he didn't want to ask for any days off because he felt like it would sacrifice his art. And he didn't want to and people were like, you can ask for days off. And he's like, well, I don't want it to get in the way of me becoming the greatest kind of thing, you know?
Wow.
His buddy Eddie was injured a lot. Like, a lot of guys in the wrestling world are injured a lot. They got metal chairs to the head, you know, they do like big swan dives off the ropes, stuff like that. So I even saw them like dive bombing onto tables and like breaking the tables in half. It's just they're insane to say the least.
Yes.
So
I agree.
Yeah. So Eddie was injured a ton, and a lot of his injuries he couldn't get any surgeries for. So he was in a constant amount of pain that he would try and medicate with drugs and alcohol, to the point that he was getting DUIs and crashing his car.
Oh no.
But Chris was always there trying to take care of him, like rolling him on his side when he slept so he didn't choke on his vomit, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were just like really like brothers, basically. Eddie had 3 ODs in his own home, and the first 2 his wife called the paramedics, and the third one he just let him lay there. And she basically said, you know, I was so tired at that point, like if he dies, he dies. If he doesn't, wonderful. But if this is his time to go, I'm just gonna let him go because I am so tired of this.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was so bad. And like I think she kept trying to like get him help, and like he just wouldn't and stuff like that. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming she tried getting him help.
Wow.
But yeah, she just basically prayed, and she's like, if you need to take him, but it would be great if he also stayed. So eventually, so he survived the third time. He survived. But he was actually fired for showing up to work high.
Oh.
And that, for some reason, is when he was like, oh shit, I guess I need to like smarten the fuck up. So
not the near death.
Yeah.
The getting fired.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's when he decided to turn his life around. And he got clean, and then he got rehired by the WWE, which was formerly the WWF. And a fun fact there that my husband told me was that there were issues revolving around the World Wildlife Foundation, because they were WWF for both of them. So they had to change their name. So
gotcha.
Yes. Apparently there was some other stuff in the background that also contributed to why they changed it, but he said that was one of the main reasons.
Gotcha.
Why couldn't World Wildlife Foundation become WWL?
I like I said, I think he said there was other stuff going on in the background as well that contributed to that. I think he said something along the lines of if it was WWF, it's a sporting, and it's I think more expensive than if they were entertainment, which I think WWE is World Wrestling Entertainment. So I think it was just cheaper if they weren't a sport or classified as a sport for advertising purposes.
And I don't know if this is true at all, but I also heard that they changed it because World Wrestling Federation made it sound like it was real wrestling, but it's not. It's entertainment.
Yeah.
And so they changed it to WWE for legal reasons.
Yeah.
Because people were thinking it was real, and this we're trying it at home and stuff like that, but it was actually just an entertainment thing.
Yeah, I think that's how that contributes to the whole sport versus entertainment thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's basically what it was. He explained it to me at 11 o'clock at night. So
and you're whatever, it's WWE now.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Exactly.
I really don't care why.
Yeah. Chris, Eddie, and Eddie's nephew Chavo went to Minneapolis for a show in November of 2005. They all went to their respective rooms for the night, and in the morning, Eddie's nephew got a phone call from the front desk saying his uncle hadn't responded to his wake-up call. His nephew attended the room with hotel staff, and they found his uncle unresponsive on the bathroom floor, gurgling.
Ugh, gurgling.
Yeah.
That's like an awful word.
Yeah. Sorry.
Gurgling.
I mean, if it makes you...
Well,
like, there's worse things to come than gurgling. So...
So buckle up, Rochelle.
Hold on to your panties. I'm sorry. So Chavo...
ready.
Okay. So Chavo grabbed his uncle, and he actually died in his arms. The autopsy declared it as acute heart failure. So then I think, I don't know. Oh yeah, okay, never mind. This I read it differently and my head processed it differently, so I thought I wrote it wrong. I wrote it correctly. We're good. So Chris called Chavo because they were all supposed to meet up and go to the gym in the hotel. But Chavo and Eddie weren't there. So Chris called Chavo, and Chavo's like, "Are you sitting down?" And so Chris said yes, and Chavo told him that Eddie had actually passed away. And Chavo explained in the interview that for a man that has no emotion, Chris, he just heard a wail from him over the phone. Like a wail of like heartbroken emotion. Like this was his best friend, his brother, and he was dead. So November 13th, 2005, Eddie Guerrero was dead at the age of 38. And Chris was absolutely devastated. In a tribute for Eddie, they did video tributes of the wrestling world. And you just see Chris sobbing on camera, trying to get his tribute out. If you don't know what he's done, you really feel for the guy. It's horrible. And even though he was in severe anguish, after the funeral, he flew to Europe with the WWE. So he basically, which people thought was super weird. He also became kind of a recluse, and he was pushing away the remaining friends he did have. But while Chris was back working, helping Eddie's wife and her kids get their life back on track, helping with their grieving, and Eddie's wife described Nancy as her angel. Mm-hmm. She basically just helped pick her back up, and she's like, I couldn't even get out of bed. She was just there for me, helping with everything she could. Chris was very emotional during this time. He would often be found crying, which was very unlike him. He was very irritable and angry now, and there was fighting at home with Nancy, and she was becoming very worried about him and his behavior change. Nancy even wanted Chris to step away from wrestling. She didn't think it was very healthy for him anymore. And this is where shit gets stupid crazy and worse than gurgling. So Chris was supposed to be at a wrestling match, and he phoned Chavo to say that they all had food poisoning, but that he could come the next day and that Chavo could pick him up at the airport. So the next morning around 5 a.m., Chavo got a text from Chris indicating where the dogs were in the house. He then proceeded to get the same text from Nancy's phone, which he thought was super weird. A wellness check was sent to Chris's house in Fayetteville, Georgia. Is it Fayetteville?
Fayetteville,
thank you.
Yeah.
Where the bodies of Chris, Nancy, and young Daniel were found deceased.
Aww.
And they kept showing pictures of Daniel, and it just made me cry.
Yeah.
And my baby was on the baby monitor beside me, And it was just like horrible. It's like, how can somebody do that to like a sweet little baby?
Yeah, they're so innocent.
It was later discovered that he had strangled his wife, suffocated his son, and later hung himself. So it was a murder-suicide.
Wow.
The police found Daniel face down in his bed, and they found Nancy in a room with a blanket wrapped around her. The WWE had a memorial for Chris and his family without knowing what had actually happened. Because it was thought at the time that it was maybe a carbon monoxide poisoning, but they didn't have all of the information.
The police just hadn't released what happened.
Yeah, exactly. So the raw tributes were from other wrestlers talking about how great Chris was and how he was their hero. He was a hard worker, all that kind of stuff. And when it was found out what had actually happened, the memorial special was taken off the air, and the name of Chris Benoit was not supposed to be mentioned ever again. So it appears that on Friday, June 22nd, 2007, Chris was having a barbecue with Daniel. He then proceeded to duct tape her to restrain her, and then used a telephone cord to strangle her, and then he placed a Bible beside her body. They had mentioned that Eddie was super religious, and he had actually like bought Chris a Bible and kind of introduced that kind of stuff to him. So I don't know if he was like really religious himself, but it might have had some significance to do with like what Eddie introduced to him. So it's also alleged that he put his knee to her back and broke her back while doing this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm assuming he like kneeled on her back and like pulled on the telephone.
Oh God.
Yeah, so that was alleged. Like,
go.
I don't know if it actually happened, but people were saying that's what happened. So it's just like, think of the like unimaginable pain that she went through before she died.
Yeah. Oh.
So then that was on Friday, and on Saturday he gave Daniel some Xanax before suffocating him, and then also placing a Bible beside his body. It was that evening that he had spoken to Chavo and indicated that the family had food poisoning, but both Nancy and Daniel were already deceased.
Oh my gosh.
On Sunday, he made searches for a story in the Bible about Elisha, which is a story about the resurrection of a child. So I'm unsure if that means he like regretted his mistake and he wanted to figure out how he could like bring his kid back from the other side. But it's like horrible. He also searched for the most effective way to snap one's neck.
Oh.
Yes. So after that, he went down to his home gym, took the lap bar off of his weight machine. He then set the weights at 240 pounds. He wrapped a towel around his neck. Then he grabbed the cord from the weight machine and then also wrapped that around his neck. And then he released the weights. And when they were searching the house, they found multiple empty bottles and cans of alcohol around the house. They even found a semblance of a suicide note in relation to a Bible passage left by Chris, indicating that he was kind of aware as to what he was doing. So, pro wrestlers are 10 times more likely to die before the age of 45 than football players.
Wow.
Due to the brain injuries that they get and, like, the injuries that they sustain. Chris's diary also gave a glimpse at his crippling mental health, with multiple entries to Eddie where he indicated he would see him soon. The initial reaction to all of this from the media was roid rage, and it's the belief that Chris had been using steroids since high school.
Oh, wow. That'll take a toll on
Or
you.
even texts from Nancy to Chris indicating that she was tired of his steroid abuse and how it affected his emotional state. After Eddie's death, So his best friend Eddie, the drug testing became so strict at the WWE that you allegedly couldn't even take aspirin without it being detected. But there were some loopholes to this.
Wow.
The WWE also made a statement indicating the physical findings announced by authorities indicate deliberation, not rage. WWE strongly suggests that it is an entire wrong. What? We strongly suggest that it is entirely wrong. There we go. Wrote it wrong. That it is entirely wrong for speculators to suggest that steroids had anything to do with these senseless acts. So basically, there was deliberation to this. It wasn't rage, so it couldn't have been the steroid use. And yeah, so they just basically dismissed all allegations that it was drug related. But his toxicology reports revealed that he had 10 times the normal amount of testosterone in his body, which...
Wow, 10 times.
Yeah. So, as I had mentioned before, Ashley had mentioned that in her Aaron Hernandez story that CTE was involved, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, including concussions and repeated blows to the head. And this is very common in football and wrestling. Chris had actually, before he did all this, and who was writing a book on CTE, it's believed that Chris thought he might have it because he was asking questions about it and he wanted to speak to him further in regards to it. He even said he had had more concussions than he could count. So he must have noticed something going on with his own self, and he's like, this isn't right. So with this theory about CTE in regards to Chris, and Chris's father agreed to have the tests done. So they received Chris's brain in July, a month after he had passed away, and it was determined that he had a very severe case of CTE, and there was damage in place that could affect emotional behavior. It's greatly believed that Eddie's death impacted him so much that after that point, there was nothing anyone could do to change his mind on anything. And ultimately, it appears that it was likely a combination of drugs, alcohol, CTE, and stress. And that is my Chris Benoit story.
Yeah. And I wish there was a way they could test for it prior to them dying, because right now they do it they do an autopsy on their brain. But if we could just do figure out a way to determine it before they die and do on football players and wrestlers especially, because we know this is such an issue, do, normal testing on this, with their yearly physical, somehow test for this and somehow find a way to help them before it gets to this point. It's just so sad.
You can't test for it?
I think.
Oh, there's currently no test to diagnose CTE.
Yeah, I think they just have to look at their brains after they die. So Jessica came up with an idea to kind of so one of the podcasts I listened to called a palate cleanser at the end, and Jessica came up with this idea, and I love it. So we're going to tell a joke at the end.
I have 9 jokes.
Oh, geez.
They're very short. They're very short. They're
okay.
1 line each.
Okay.
Jeez. All right. Why didn't the skeleton climb the mountain?
Why?
Because it didn't have any guts.
Or ba-dum-bum.
It didn't have the guts. I fucked it up. Okay. What does a bee use to brush its hair? A honeycomb.
Aww. That's cute. I like that one.
All right. What do you call cheese that isn't yours?
Nacho cheese.
Yeah. That's Gouda. And nacho cheese. So dumb. All right. This one took me a second to figure out. This is a statement, not a question, okay?
Okay.
A guy walks into a bar and was disqualified from the limbo contest.
Because he walked into it.
Yeah, he walked into a bar. Patoink. All right. Why can't a nose be 12 inches long?
Because that's a foot.
Yeah. Because then it would be a foot. Good job. All right. I got this one too. What does a lemon say when it answers the phone?
Yellow.
Yellow. How does a taco say grace? Let us pray. All right, and you guys probably know this one, and it's my last one. What time did the man go to the dentist?
2:30.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Love it. Well, if you want more of these amazing jokes and our amazing humor, you can find us on our website at historiesandmysteriesPodcast.GoDaddySites.com.
So our website's going to be changing a little bit soon. We have somebody working on it for us that knows a little bit more about stuff than I do. So our domain name is going to be changing a little bit, but probably not much. But just keep an eye out on our social media for that info. And we can be found on Facebook and Instagram, where I will make that update. And we're also on TikTok at Histories and Mysteries Pod. We're doing Ghost of the Week. We're also doing, I'm starting a series called On This Day in History. And then I think Ashley might do like a true crime story once every couple weeks or so. But yeah, so we're trying some
Let
things.
us know what you think. Reach out. We love to hear from you guys.
You can rate and review us.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, thanks for listening. Yeah, and we look forward to bringing you 2 new stories next week.